commitment march titled "Get Your Knee Off Our Necks." It's going to be taking place at the Lincoln Memorial, and it's organized by the National Action Network, led by the Reverend Al Sharpton. On an annual basis, this group, the National Action Network, actually leads a march to commemorate the March on Washington that took place in 1963. So this year would actually mark the 57th anniversary of that particular event. This year's march obviously takes on added significance because of the terrible events that happened with the killing of George Floyd, and the marches, the demonstrations, and the demands for racial justice and equity that came about as a result. What this slide basically indicates is where that march is going to be taking place. The stage area is going to be the Lincoln Memorial, so it's going to commemorate and replicate exactly what happened 63 years ago during the March on Washington. The guests are supposed to start arriving at about 7 a.m. and we will provide everyone on the platform. There is a WhatsApp platform information for those who want to join that platform. If you're not already on the platform, we will share the information about what to do towards the end. But the Lincoln Memorial is probably the most visible, the most well-known set of monuments in DC. That's where Lincoln's statue is. That's where the reflecting pool is, which is where the march was staged in 1963. So that's where the march is also going to be. That's going to be the staging area for this year. We will communicate exactly where we will gather. But right now it looks like our gathering point might actually be at the corner of Constitution and 17th, but we'll communicate that. Events, people begin to gather at 7, and then the speeches on that day will commence from 11 and they will end at 1 p.m. And then what will happen is everybody will then march from the Lincoln Memorial about 0.4 miles down the road to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. And the expectation is that that march, with all the people that are going to be involved, would likely take about 2 hours. So it would be from about 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So again, remember, August 28th, get off our next march. There's going to be some additional information that we're going to be sharing. And when we do march, there are several reasons why we're marching. We're obviously marching in support of racial justice, but in particular, we're marching to commemorate the memory of the life of George Floyd. We're also marching to remember the life of Toyin Salau, a Nigerian American lady who would have turned 20 a day before the march, and who lost her life after attending one of the Black Lives Matter events, again, in support of the killing of George Floyd. And we will also be marching in memory and remembrance of Emmanuel Otunuga, who was killed here in Silver Springs, Nigerian American young man. Emmanuel was 26, was killed by the police. And when we march, we will not only be remembering George, we will also be remembering Toyin as well as Emmanuel. The dress code for the march, for the Nigerian American community that will be attending that march, would be a white t-shirt. So we want to make this as easy as possible for everyone. So everybody who wants to turn up and be part of the Nigerian contingent, just turn up in your white t-shirt. Find a green scarf, a green bandana, a green armband, a green headband, anything green to commemorate the other color of the Nigerian flag, just get it. So there's a planning group that's working on this. We will also make sure that we have some materials that we'll bring. So if you can't find anything green, don't worry about it, just come along and we'll be able to provide you with a green headband or armband to follow up with. There will be an optional branded t-shirt. So what you're seeing in the top right section of this particular slide is what that t-shirt looks like. So on the front, it's going to be an overlap of both the Nigerian and the American flags. Of the Nigerian and American maps. And it's going to be indicating, the fist indicating the struggle, and it will be aligning with the Black Lives Matter movement. And on the back, there will be some, particular call-outs, and we will, in those call-outs, be commemorating Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, as well as Emmanuel Otunuga. So again, dress code is white. There's an optional t-shirt for those who want to purchase that t-shirt. Please send an email to Miss Chris at mschrisrealty.com. We will be posting this particular email as well in the chat box. So please, if you're interested in being part of this, just reach out. It's completely optional. All you have to do is turn up in a white t-shirt, and you'll feel every bit a part of the Nigerian community that will be at the march. As we've been having conversations, one of the things we've tried to do is also to make sure that we are developing a fact basis, some metrics that allows us really begin to put our finger on the pulse of what the Nigerian community thinks and feels about these racial issues and about the question of political engagement. So we've been asking a number of questions. I won't go into details on all the responses, but overwhelmingly, those of us that have been part of these conversations have indicated that we do believe that our racial experiences, by and large, are really no different to what African Americans go through. That at the end of the day, it's if you're black, and that the color of your skin, whether you're Nigerian, whether you're Caribbean, whether you're African American, actually to a large extent dictates a lot of the experiences that you have. A majority of us have also indicated that we believe we can actually do more as a community to further the cause of racial equality, that we have not been as involved as we perhaps ought to be. Just about a little under half of us actually have participated in the protests up until now. This particular march will give us an opportunity to again get involved. Many of us have experienced racism overtly, and we've had panelist after panelist provide a sense of what their experiences have been. And then we've also started asking questions about, so what then happens beyond the march? On the 28th comes, we march, then what? Is that sufficient as members of the community? Is just commemorating and showing solidarity? Would that be enough? Is there anything else that we need to do? And so we've started asking questions about political engagement. A lot of the people who attend these panels have indicated that, they are actually eligible to vote. And so we've asked some clear questions about what type of engagement people have. We've asked questions about whether people vote, and overwhelmingly, it looks like we are, even if we're not out there marching, it looks like we're starting to get more and more involved in voting. And in terms of how we vote, the community has come back and said, look, they're voting for everything from local elections to national elections. And then last week, we also started asking a number of questions, which was around, if we get involved politically here, is it only because we're trying to impact our own lives and our own outcomes here in the US? Is there any way in which political engagement here can actually impact Nigeria as well? And the responses have been that yes, that engaging politically here could actually potentially be helpful to Nigeria. And people mentioned areas like corruption, free and fair elections, being able to have more of an influence in terms of governance, that those might be some areas where we, by being more involved politically here, we can actually begin to help enhance governance back in Nigeria. Today will be the 7th panel. We've had 6 panels so far, each one remarkably interesting, each one bringing together a significant variety of people with a lot of experience across, both from a career perspective as well as the racial experiences and the levels of political engagement they've had. So they've been really stimulating panels. And what we're doing today is that we are bringing together some panelists who are going to help us delve a little deeper into this question of what the next step should be. So we are marching. We've agreed that marching makes sense. But then what happens beyond the march, and what are the concrete next steps that we need to be taken? And so what we'll be doing today is delving a little deeper into that political issue, the question of political engagement. If a lot of us are saying that we can do more to further a cause, the African American cause, which we have now agreed is also our fight, we need to explore questions like, why haven't we done that up until now? Are there things that divide us? Are there things that keep us separate from communities with whom we actually share a lot in common? And we'll also delve a little more deeply into the question of, why bother to be involved politically? How does it impact us? And in return, is there any way that our country, the motherland itself, Nigeria, because we're both Nigerians and Americans, so is there any way in which more engagement here, which we say is useful, will actually also begin to help Nigeria? So those are the questions that we will be asking. And my panelists today are Ekene, Okeke, Olayinka, Sarumi, and Dr. Adeleke Otunuga. So I want to welcome the panel. And so what I'll do is I will just call on the panelists to, in just 2 minutes, tell us just a little bit about themselves, what they do, where they are. And then once they've gone through those introductions, we'll then delve into the conversation. So I will start with Dr. Otunuga, and then I will go on to Ms. Ekene Okeke, and Mr. Sarumi will round out that initial 2-minute session where the panelists are just telling us a bit about themselves. Dr. Otunuga, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Fabiyi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adeleke Otunuga. I live in the state of Maryland. I am a business owner.
Thank you very much. Ms. Okeke.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ekene. I also live in Maryland. It's good to be here again. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Sarumi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olayinka Sarumi. I live in the Maryland area. I'm a software engineer and glad to be here again. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll say let's jump into it. So one of the things, so earlier on I had described the results of some polling that we had done with folks that have been attending the conversations. And in fact, I'll go back to that particular poll. And one of that result is basically, the question was, can Nigerian Americans do more to further the cause of racial equality? And by a long shot, those of us who have been attending this panel said yes. So my question to each of you is, why do you think we have not been doing as much as we could before? Why is it that, those of us in the Nigerian American community why haven't we been alive to this responsibility? So I'm just throwing it open. Whoever wants to go first can go. Otherwise, I'll call on someone.
All right. Good evening again, everyone. Why have we not been actively involved or participating in protests and civil engagements in the US, right? Is that right? The question?
Right. Yes.
Okay. I think that for the most part, it is because we mostly think of home as a place other than here. we are firstly Nigerians, and so you will be surprised how many of us who are African immigrants live in the US, and we have very little knowledge about what is going on around us here. But we have extensive knowledge about socio-political happenings in our country, in Africa. Mm-hmm. I think it's a cultural thing, with deep-seated affinity to our fatherland comes, a commitment to that space.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Dr. Otunuga, sorry. Do we have more cultural affinity for our fatherland than, say, Somalis do?
And I understand where you're going with that.
Or that say Kenyans do? Because the second generation
or the Chinese or the Indians. I was actually coming to that. Okay. It's a tragedy that although we want to imbibe everything about here on our kids, most of our kids cannot even speak our native languages. Yet we ourselves, we are totally divorced from what is going on around us.
Okay. So,
for instance, even something as simple as homeowner associations, we are not involved, and we own usually the most expensive house in the neighborhood.
Okay. So hold that thought, Dr. Otunuga. I will come back to that, because what I hear you say is, it's one thing for us to say that, look, politically, my political energies will go back to the fatherland or the motherland. But it speaks entirely to another type of disconnect. For somebody to, for example, be in a certain place and not be active, say, for example, in the homeowners association, when you're a homeowner in that place itself, or not to be active in, say, a school board or in school districts or in PTAs, when you actually have children in those schools. So it's not just, it appears as if what you are suggesting is our disengagement is not only political, that our disengagement seems to go beyond the political. But I'll come back to that. It is
total. Our disengagement is total, and it is not helping.
Okay. So let me go then to Ms. Ekene. I'll come back to a number of points you raised. Ms. Okeke?
Yes.
So it's the same question. We admit that we're not as involved as we need to be. Mm-hmm. We admit that, look, we should be doing more. And Dr. Otunuga has brought up a very important and interesting point, which is like, maybe it's just because we don't feel like this is home enough, right? When we think about home, our notion of home is different. That opens up an entire new area of discussion that we're going to go into. But what are your thoughts about why our disengagement, what the reasons are for our disengagement?
Before I start, I would say that, many Nigerians have become more engaged, especially many of the younger Nigerian members of the communities. But I think that the reason why before now we had never been as engaged in anything really as we are supposed to do is because it's a cultural thing, and engagement was never part of our culture. I don't because we don't see, we don't think that these things matter. We believe that, I don't know how to put it, but we always believe that we just got what we put in. You wanted to get a job, you got a job. Like, what more did you want? We didn't, it was not a call, you go back home to Nigeria, even there's not engagement in regular things like, he pointed out, like people would think we would be, politically or otherwise. We just, you got a job, you got the things that you wanted, and you didn't complain. So I think it's a cultural thing. We're not culturally inclined to be engaged in more than the things that we think we need to be engaged in. And I believe that's why we haven't been as engaged.
So we'll come back to this cultural issue again, because I think it opens up a number of interesting directions for conversation. But what you're suggesting is, so younger Nigerians are more involved.
Yes,
so
because
we are. So what's changed for younger Nigerians? What's the cultural?
I think that we have started to become mixed up in multiple other cultures. You know, younger Nigerians are being born here, they're growing up here, and they're coming in contact with people of different cultures. You know, you're growing up with the African American kids, like actual peers, growing up even with the white kids and, you know, the Indian kids and all of that. And you know, you see how passionate they are about the things that they care about and about their communities and how it affects other people. And I think when you see things like that, it would be weird that it wouldn't move you and it wouldn't make you want to be more involved, because you start to realize that these things actually affect me. You know, it's not possible to be shielded from any of these things that many of these other communities speak up against or fight against.
So what you're suggesting is a lot of you that are much younger than those of us first generation Nigerians are growing up seeing your friends, your peers engaged, involved at levels that actually challenge you and makes you realize that there is no alternative to involvement.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. So we'll come back to a number of directions that you opened up. Mr. Sarumi, please, the same question is yours.
Thank you. I think I agree with both with Dr. Otunuga and Ms. Ekene. I mean, they are right in the sense that, like, the question is, why is it that we don't get involved? I don't think it's a cultural thing, just like Dr. Otunuga said, and also like Dr. Ms. Ekene said. You know, the younger ones are getting more involved. But in our case, like our generation that came here probably in the 80s and 90s for 90% economic reason, I think is the fact that the attitude we brought from Nigeria, it's what's holding us down here. We brought this laissez-faire attitude from Nigeria where we're not, you know, it's like we're a subdued kind of people. You know, it's like fella sang, you know, we don't care. Mama day for house, Papa day for house. Nobody cares anymore. We are so scared. You know, we don't want to get involved politically. Even when you talk, your friends will tell you, keep it down. You know, don't be this aggressive, whatever. You know, we just like to conform. We tend to conform with the law. You know, and I think, like I said, I don't think it's a plus for us. I think we're just a subdued people from Nigeria. And that's a fact, you know, because if you look at what goes on in Nigeria, it's the attitude that we brought over here. We tend, you know, to just let things slide by us. So we come over here, the first thing we'll do is, okay, I need to get my papers, right? You conform with the law. You don't want to get involved with the law. You don't want to get anything to do against the law. You get your papers, then like Mr. Ekene said, you get a job. Then the next thing is to live the the American dream. And then you have kids, you start telling your kids, no, don't do this, no, don't do that, don't go here, don't go there. You know? But like Ekene said, the younger ones, they're growing up in the midst of other races. And it's more like this is all they know. Their ideas is growing among them. Our ideas is within us, and we're dying with it. And like, you know, it's not a cultural thing. It's just that we just don't care enough about our environment. about what we think is good enough for us, we just let it go. You know, I think that's the problem we're having. We just don't care. We don't care enough. That's what I think it is.
Okay, so Dr. Thanks for those perspectives. So Dr. Otunuga, I'll go back to you because you had started, you'd brought up this initial question of culture, and both Ekene and Mr. Sarumi have addressed that question. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to expand further. So, but before you go on, so here's the reality. Nigerians in America and Nigerian Americans have been here for a very, very long time, right? We've been here in waves. The first wave that came here was in the late 50s, 60s. My father, for example, was in school here in the 60s. So we've been here for a long time. You know, people like Adeleke studied here, right? Adeleke, I believe, went to Howard, if I'm not wrong. So what then is it about us? And while we've been here for all these waves and all these periods, there are other people from cultures that are very similar to ours, the Somalis who have been here, Kenyans, and I would argue that their political outcomes in this country have been better. We have a Somali member of parliament, of Congress, right? We have the second generation son of a Kenyan who became president of the United States. What is it? And Mr. Sarumi has explained that, you know, maybe we're bringing attitudes that we brought from Nigeria. What is it about Nigerians, and whatever political issues we have back home that makes our outcomes different from that of anybody else? What African culture do we hold on to that is different from the African culture that the Kenyan has or that the Somali has?
Well, so, you want me to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is the thing. I'm still going to hold on to the culture thing. The reality is this, and this is confirmed by psychology. The nature-nurture theory, you know, what they teach you, what is put in your brain from your early formative years, and what you witness in your environment speaks a lot. When we were in school, for instance, when we were in the university, there was a perception around activism. Bright and gifted students stay in the library, while the not so bright ones, they lay about, they call them, join the students' union. That was the general perception. And so when people like us decided to join the student union, we had a call or a conference with some of our professors. Why are you trying to throw your life away? What is your problem? Why do you want to mingle with them? And it is this same thing that your parents at home will tell you. And let me now address, because Dr. Fabiyi, you mentioned a very important point. Nigerians have been here in waves. A lot of our parents, you know, the immediate past generation, a lot of them were educated here. And you will agree that for those ones, their perception about civil rights activism and movements were different from the ones that never left the shores of Nigeria. And so the first wave of civil rights activists in Nigeria were actually those who came abroad to study, those who had one form of exposure or the other to the Western countries, who saw this. Look at the curriculum in Nigeria. I did not know about Martin Luther King until I got to the university. Ditto for a lot, you know, a lot of people my generation. We didn't know about Kwame Nkrumah, we didn't know about none of these African activists until we got to the university. Why? Because the curriculum was designed to keep us in place and in check. And so, because of the nature-nurture theory, when we got here, because we already had our formative years in Nigeria, our teeth were cut already. We came here with that same attitude. Stay in one place, be a good boy, don't look for police, police will not look for you, you know. So long as you are earning your living, nobody is disturbing you, don't disturb anybody. That right there is the attitude. And that is why I said it's a cultural thing.
Okay. Thanks for building up on that.
If I can.
Yes, please, Mr. Sarumi.
If I can expand a little bit on what Dr. Otunuga said. Look, yeah, the first wave of Nigerians came over here in the 50s and 60s. One thing that we have to be aware of, which is a fundamental issue with us in Nigeria, is we never fought for independence in Nigeria. We never fought for freedom. People like Awolowo sat on the table, they used their brain, they spoke English, they used their intellectual capability to tackle the colonial masters. And like, okay, if this is what the law you're bringing to this country, this is how we're going to do it. If this constitution you're going to bring, I mean, for every constitution they try to bring into the country, you had intellectuals that would sit back and sit on the table with white men to wrestle them down on the nitty-gritty of the law, because they themselves, most of them were lawyers. So the battle was fought in a conference room. It never came onto the street. Never. If you look at the history of Nigeria, only a few instances where, like the Aba riots or things like that, where you had actual confrontation with the colonial masters. Besides that, we got our independence on a platter of gold, and that has been our attitude, less affair, right? Besides wet here in the 60s, where there was political issues within Western Nigeria that led to political turmoil and the military took over, we have always been a quiet people. We have three different nations in Nigeria: the Hausas, the Igbos, the major tribes, the Yorubas. Our perspective, our attitude towards politics is completely different. So even when we're talking about Nigeria as a whole, we have to be careful to separate it at some level about how do we approach stuff. You know, some of us are very aggressive, some are not. And from the part of Nigeria where I come from, and I happen to have served at the national level in a different kind of environment, where I was able to see Nigeria at a higher level, right? The fact remains that we Nigerians, we are docile. The only time you see riots starting in Lagos, I mean in Nigeria, is in Lagos. When you talk about human rights activism, fight against the government, it's always in Lagos. It always starts in Lagos. I've never in my life living in Nigeria seen any political riot start from the north or from the east. Never. Let's be realistic about that. So people in the West, particularly those in Lagos, they are more politically inclined to the point that they want to do things according to the law. They want to discuss issues. They want to sit back in the conference room. They want to sit back and discuss, okay, this is how we're going to go about it. No, let's talk about this. Let's discuss this. That's the attitude. When you come over to the US, it's a new country, different laws. The last thing on the Nigerian mind is about talking about politics, because one, you're not even an American. So you just want to get your green card, working, living your life. And we have this bad attitude too about we're a little bit materialistic. We like to compete among ourselves. So our focus is entirely on money. And then to agree with Mr. Otunuga, right, that majority of us don't even see this country as home. We are always running to make the money and go build one mansion or the other. So getting into politics here is not the issue. The issue to most Nigerians, my generation and people that came before me, is to find a way to make that money and get back to Nigeria, build a 4-bedroom bungalow, send 2 cars over there, and be able to go back there and just ride around town like, yes, I'm okay now. You know, so when it comes to politics, like when we're talking about Black Lives Matters in this country, where people have suffered, a particular race has been dominated by another race, and even other races have looked down on Black people in this country. The Asians, the Indians, the Chinese, even the Arabs look down on us. You understand? Because we are black. But we over here, the blacks in this country, yeah, they felt the heat. They are the one fighting for it. And what they fought for, like I said, is what we're enjoying. Is what we're enjoying today. But we came over here. Our focus is not that. Our focus is completely different. So that's why I said it's not a cultural thing. We fight in Nigeria. You give me 1 minute. We fight in Nigeria. We protest in Nigeria, but you know, in a minimal way, right? But when it comes to the US is pretty much a homogeneous society where there are so many races, cultures, and everything, and we're just a subgroup of the black race here. So our attitude is like, well, the country is there for you to take. So
so you've made a number of interesting points, but let me allow Ekene, Ms. Ekene, to opine, and then I'll follow up with a number of things. Actually, let me just quickly say a number of things. So here's the first one. You are right that in fact, ours is the first country that I know where the colonial, first of all, I will never call them colonial masters, because even our language, the language of calling somebody a colonial master, tells us, but that's what we were taught in school, to call the colonialists oppressors, to call them masters. They were colonial powers. They were colonial authorities. But it took me, I used to call them colonial masters until I went to school. I was schooling in Cambridge at the time, and there was an Algerian lady, an Algerian colleague that I had in class. And we were having a conversation, and I said, oh, the colonial masters. And she said, colonial masters? Why on earth would you call people who colonized your country colonial masters? And it made me realize that it was something that I had actually taken for granted. That's all, that's just how that's what we were taught to call them. But coming back to something you said, you are correct that on the whole, we did not go through in Nigeria the type of struggles that perhaps the Kenyans went through in Kenya, where Jomo Kenyatta had to lead the Uhuru struggle against the British. We did not go through what Kamuzu Banda had to do in Zambia. We did not go through what Mugabe and ZANU had to do in Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. We did not have to go through perhaps the type of efforts that Nkrumah had to go through in Ghana. But the reality is, there were protests in Nigeria. There were people like Michael Imodu. There was a strong labor movement effort led by people like Michael Imodu that put people on the streets. In fact, one of the first racial protests in Nigeria, I forget who it was, but it was in Lagos. It was a Lagos socialite, a surveyor, I believe, who was kicked out of a hotel in Lagos, on Lagos Island, because the hotel was supposed to be reserved for white colonials. This was early on. But having said that, Mr. Sarumi, I think the point you've made is an important point, which is ours is the first country that I'm aware of where the colonial authorities were ready to turn over independence to us in 1957. And we said we were not ready.
1956, actually.
Okay, ours is the first country that I'm aware of where we delayed independence because we said, right? Because sections of our country said they were not ready. So we've had this experience that I think you've rightly captured, which is an experience where we probably have not fought as much as others on our continent have had to fight for independence. We haven't really fought for a lot of things that has happened to us. In fact, in 1999, when Nigeria became a democracy again, it was not because, yes, there were efforts and there were fights, struggles that maybe, some of us were involved in. But ultimately, the only thing that actually brought democracy in 1999 was because Abacha died. It wasn't because people were on the streets and there was an Arab Spring moment that transformed anything. It was because the man died. And if the man hadn't died, I cannot tell you for sure that if he had still been alive, he would not be some kind of dictator in Nigeria today. But so your point is taken. So let me quickly go to Mr. Ekene. And then while Mr. Ekene is speaking, anybody that has any questions that you want us to throw to the panelists, please just throw it into the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to that.
Okay, so the question of why we think, or why I think we have, or because like I said, we have a culture of not being involved. I think there are many issues, and like everyone here has pointed out, one of the many issues is we don't have a unifying story for why many of us migrated to the USA. Most of these other countries we talk about, the Indians, the Kenyans, Pakistani, Somalis, usually there was a unifying event that occurred in their country to cause for them to have to leave. So that unifying story usually binds them together and keeps them, as one unit. Then we also have the issue of tribes, a lot of other African countries have the issue of tribes, but I don't know that many of them have it on the same level as Nigeria, because even though, we answer the name of Nigeria, we're not really a country. I mean, many of us have pointed out we are multiple countries under one. And this is how many of the Nigerian political elite, that's what they use to subdue the people. They would tell you, if one of your people wins, it means that all of you have won, and we see that tactic tried to be used here with African Americans. They tell you, well, we will put one of you guys at the top and you can't complain. We see that many times happen. It's another style of subjugation. Then we also have this thing where, because we don't have a culture of protesting and unrest, we have no faith in the system, which, I mean, is ironic because you've never tried it, how would you know? But we cannot fathom the idea that you can get something positive through civil unrest, or through not even civil unrest, but just through any type of violence. We always, you hear Nigerians say, well, why would I go and die? And it's like, if I die, the country keeps going and nothing changes. And sometimes it is true. We've seen many Nigerians come up and try to fight for the people, and then they get killed, or, things happen to them, and the country never changes, and people forget who they are. And so sometimes it feels like their death is in vain. And so those are the things that I believe is the reason why we have this culture of not being involved in Nigeria. There's no type of solidarity where we come from. But I also do think that we have to, because as I'm saying this, my mind is going through a lot of stuff. Sometimes we try to get things to work with the use of a pre-existing blueprint, but sometimes one person's blueprint might not necessarily work for you. And I think that for Nigerians, it would be important to realize that maybe the way things work for other people might not necessarily work for us. And we have to remember that, and we have to try to manage that system. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, there are many instances that I have seen people fighting the system without the system even realizing that they're fighting it. We see like the issues of the LGBT community in Nigeria. I mean, I see them gaining massive grounds in Nigeria. And the Nigerian system doesn't even know it, and they're using social media, to try to, get people to sort of normalize the things that we think that is not normal to us, And then we talked about this thing where, language matters with, colonial masters and all that stuff. The same thing goes on with our, religions. recently Beyonce had this, she did this Lion King music video for Disney. And in the Lion King music video, she said that she wanted to dedicate this music to Africa. And so she, you know, it was a whole African album with a lot of Nigerian artists on it. And she had a lot of imagery that was basically a shout out to many traditional African religions. And the people who had the most negative reviews of this artwork that she put out were other Nigerians. And they insisted that she was trying to normalize juju. And that was confusing to me, because are we saying that anything, are we, because you know, through colonialism, a way that these people were able to conquer us was to tell us or to convince us that we were somehow less than. And now we are supposed to believe that anything that was originally part of us is also dark and is evil, and Black is bad. Because these same Nigerians will go to places like Dubai and Thailand and Bali, India, and you will go to their historical religious sites and you will pay your respects to their spirits. But when it comes to the African traditional religion, it's just, there's no question about it. It's evil. So my point is that it's a lot of factors that are working against us, a lot of different factors. And I think if we start to see what those factors are, it would be a good way to start to deal with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for those deep perspectives. I think one that immediately resonated with me was this question of a common story. So I would say maybe 80–90% of the Somalis in this country came because of one singular event, the civil war in their country. And I think, to your point, it is possible that having a single story that brings you here, there's solidarity in tragedy. And so maybe the solidarity in that tragedy makes for a more connected community. But the story of the Nigerian in America is the same as the story of the Indian in America, right? Is the same as the story of the Chinese person in America, is the same as the story of the Kenyan here. We all came primarily in the beginning for opportunity. But I want to challenge, I want to push back on this notion of a culture. So while I agree that that maybe in Nigeria we have not had a history of massive social movements and massive political movements that have managed to mobilize everyone. That this notion that, you know what, our culture makes us a little laid back politically, I want to push back on that a little bit. And I want to throw a few things out and get your perspectives on this. So the first one is that the organization that Martin Luther King belonged to, the organization that we know today as the primal movement for the civil rights struggle that eventually led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act, was formed in 1957. So the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was formed in 1957, right? The African American in America has been here for over 400 years. And so what we know of the struggle, this history, what we call a culture of struggle, is actually one that is, quite frankly, if we think about it as a movement that involves massive numbers of people, that is recent. That has only happened in the last 50 to 60 years. It's not that there were no protests before then. There were. But there was nothing that came anywhere close to the scale of what became possible when people like Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Council, and then people like John Lewis and SNCC, the Students' National Coordinating Committee that organized the freedom rides. In fact, SNCC was not formed until 1960. So all those freedom rides we see was formed, they were all done by an organization of students that did not exist until 1960. So the reality is that, and then if we go back to a place like, and so the history of struggle as we know it today, yeah, there were always, protest movements. There were always, protests that flared up in different parts of the country, but a coordinated national movement did not occur until about 50, 60 years ago. So here's what I would suggest. What that suggests, and then if we go back to Nigeria, for example, you are extremely right. Those who have pointed out the fact that we don't have a history of extensive political engagement. But Nigeria is also the same country where in the early 60s, as you know, Mr. Sarumi, there was a young man by the name of Adaka from the Niger Delta, who declared his own country. Adaka used to be student union president at the University of, I believe it was Nsukka. Adaka then went on to join the army. Adaka was actually the first leader of what we call the National Union of Nigerian Students. It was the first it's one of the first presidents of the National Union of Nigerian Students, which many people know today as NANS. Adaka formed his own republic and fought the Nigerian military. In fact, it was from prison that Adaka was then co-opted into the Nigerian army when the Civil War broke out. So we've had these occasional instances of people who, and then, arguably, these instances where people have felt strongly about what they believe, that they've been ready to stand up and fight for it. And in fact, if ready, die for it. But what we have failed to do, you are absolutely right in Nigeria, is to have a movement and to have the discipline of mobilizing people in support of that movement. That is one thing. So I think if there's a culture, it is that culture of seeing something through, that culture of actually beginning to recognize that you cannot win unless you begin to build coalitions. That's what we have so far failed to do. And so one of the things that one of the natural questions that then leads to is, how do we, if we're to be successful here, you've pointed out all the challenges that we have as a people. If we're to be successful as a people in beginning to forge forward, it means we have to find a way to mobilize ourselves. It means we have to find a way, despite tribal or ethnic issues or religious issues, even here in the Americas, we need to find a way to begin to work together. It means we need to find ways of reaching across and finding other organizations that believe in similar things to what we do. So my questions to the panel now is, how do we even begin to do this? I will start with you, Mr. Sarumi, then we'll go to Ms. Okeke, and then we'll round that out with Dr. Otunuga. So how do we begin to do this? We don't have a culture of engagement. We don't have a culture of facing up to the system. We don't have a strong culture of working together across communities. How do we do this? What do we do to make sure that we don't begin to replicate those things that have really not led us anywhere?
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm. There are two things that comes to mind in this regard. Before I address those two things, first of all, let me talk about the issue of tribal sentiments among us in Nigeria and the divide and conquer issue that we see in Nigeria and we see here in America also. The tribal sentiments that we live with in Nigeria, see us coming over to America, and one of the reasons why we're not very active is that tribally we try to separate ourselves. That's a fact. We separate ourselves into all kinds of township meetings and township associations and the rest of that. You know, you have the Yoruba group, you have the Ilesha group, you have the Jebu people, you have the Igbos too. They're doing theirs. I'm not sure the Akwa Ibom or Rivers or not. I'm not sure if they have any, but I know the Yorubas are there, the Igbos on one side, the Yorubas on one side. That's an issue. If we're in this country and we need to move forward together as Nigerians, at some point we need to get together. Hopefully that can even help us back in Nigeria. That's one. Two, when you talk about divide and conquer tactics, right? The same thing that affects us in Nigeria, whereby we're divided tribally and religiously. Same thing happens here too. Mm-hmm. If I can throw something in real quick. You see that guy called Ekene West? You know what he's trying to do? He's been helped by Republicans, right? To kind of draw black votes away from Biden, you know, in the next election. Hopefully he will not be successful. But that is part of the divide and conquer tactics that goes on among black people. Now, having said that, two things that I see that can help us in this regard is this. One, we have to encourage our children. Our generation, right? We can try now. We can really try and try to make amends, but it's gonna take a lot of effort. We have to encourage our children to see beyond tribe among us Nigerians, whether you're Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, Ichekiri, Yoruba. We have to encourage our children to see beyond that. We have to encourage our children when they get into college to liaise with African American brothers and sisters of their generation so that they are one, so that they become one voice. And those kids are doing that now. So I'm impressed because I was at one of the protests in DC a couple of weeks ago, and I saw Nigerian kids playing the Nigerian music with the Nigerian flag. They were all over the place, jumping and dancing. I took part in the protest for like an hour or two, and then I left. The other thing is, like I said earlier on, we as a people, our generation, we have to reach out also. Besides coming together as a people, as a Nigerian people, Igbos, Yoruba, whatever you come from in Nigeria, we have to come together, right? We have to find a way, right, to reach across to African Americans of our generation. Unfortunately, the way we live, particularly in the DMV area, it's so possible for you to live in an environment where you never get to be a friend with African American brothers. You know, you want to go see your friend, you go see your friend from your homebodies. You drive, you sit down on your deck, have a drink and stuff like that. It's so possible that your community does not even allow you to mix with them. I've lived in an environment where my first house in this country where I had African American brothers. We eat together, we drink together. I go to their house, they come to my house. They learned a lot from me, I learned a lot from them. So we must be able to reach across to them. Let's share our experiences with them. Let them know that their struggle is our struggle. Let them know that whatever happens to them happens to us. If it's not happening to us now, it can happen to our children. So we need to bridge that gap. We need to bridge that gap between us and them, you know, and at the same time, encourage our kids, right, to not try to confine our kids to only our society, but encourage them to go out and reach out to their friends, African American brothers, so they can be one voice. And hopefully those kids can make a change in the next 30 years back in Africa. Maybe they get to be in a position of power and authority in this country and can influence policies towards Africa or Nigeria. So those are the two things, you know, that I think will be the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. Ms. Okeke?
So one of the ways that we can begin to build whatever is broken between us as Nigerians, especially Nigerians in the diaspora, would be to, you know, like Mr. Sarumi pointed out, deal with this issue of tribes, because it's one of the biggest issues that Nigerians have, and it has followed us over here, you know. So we don't find solidarity between ourselves because we only see solidarity in terms of tribes. You know, it's a person part of my tribe, then yes. If they're Nigerian, it's like, you know, I mean, it's a little better here, but So I think dealing with that, and it's starting to change with, you know, with the next generation, like he pointed out as well. But I think that's one of the biggest issues. Like, we have community building within the tribes, but we don't have it on such a large level that it can make impacts. You know, he pointed out the different groups, the different tribe groups. You know, I mean, within the Igbos, I mean, we have Imo, Enugu, Anambra, and even within those, you have specific villages. I mean, I have gone to groups where it was just 8 people, and it's like, why are you even doing this? Like, what's the point of this? You know, I've seen people who, you know, not to call anyone out, they do medical missions within their village group, which is amazing. But just imagine what you can achieve if you were able to get the whole, even just the whole Igbos together, or the whole Yoruba, not even to talk of the whole of Nigeria together. Just imagine the impact. But I think it's not easy for us to see that future. You know, our parents, you know, I'm going to sit here, my parents haven't helped it. My parents have been tribalists. So me coming out of my shell was something that I had to learn by myself from interacting with other Nigerians and seeing that, you know, this is nonsense, you know. So that is where we have to start. That tribe issue is a big one. If we can tackle that, every other thing is already halfway done. And then with the issue of dealing, of building the relationship with African Americans, that also needs to, it needs to come with understanding each other, because, you know, what happens in this country when you come here is, you know, the system is kind of like, oh, you know, African Americans are at the bottom and everybody else is at the top. So then they give you a choice. You want to be with them, then you're going to be at the bottom. But you can identify with us and we can elevate you past them. And this is where anti-Blackness comes from, right? So a lot of Nigerians, even though we are physically Black, we are very anti-Black, right? In our politics and our dealings, because we want to, our politics is very much in line with white people, because we think that's the winning group. And that's so you want to be with the winning group. And this is where a lot of the issues, you know, we always want to let people know, oh, we're not that kind of Black people. Oh, we go to school. Oh, we do this and we do that. And so over the years, that thing where we try to identify with the oppressors really put a wedge in the relationship we could have had with our African American brothers and sisters. And I think we need to repair that. We need to let them know that it's, first of all, it's not possible to be white. That's not a real thing. We need to let go of that notion that you can somehow, you know, at least for Black people, you cannot buy into whiteness. For most other minority groups, it's possible. It is possible because they're not actually physically Black, but for us, it's not. So we need to let go of that notion, and we need to actually sit with them. I mean, really sit with them, you know, in every way, you know, even with ourselves. You know, when we hear something terrible about that has happened, or something dealing with a Nigerian, our first thing should not be, oh, I mean, maybe if he had gone to school, or maybe if that, no, listen first and see the ways that this person has every right to exist and every right to be. We don't have to be perfect to be allowed to be existed, to be allowed to exist, you know? So yes, I think repairing those relationships in those ways would help us to begin to build the solidarity that we would need to have the political impact that we can, that can lead to multiple changes.
Thank you very much for those perspectives. We'll now go to Dr. Otunuga to help us land on this particular topic, and then right after that, Ms. Rachel will go into the comment box and bring up some of the comments that the participants have actually been. It's been really active in the comment box, and I want to thank everybody for those remarkable perspectives. So right after Dr. Otunuga speaks, Ms. Rachel, please, you read some of those chats to us.
Yes, very interesting perspectives by both Mr. Sarumi and Ekene. It's illuminating. If we agree, and I think we seem to agree, that a lot of the problems of our disengagement stems from our cultural orientation, then it means, first and foremost, a reorientation of mindsets is very important. And that is why what we're doing with this and where we take this to after the march on the 28th is very important. We need to continue to engage with our people. We need to continue to make our people understand and see the reason why getting involved is sine qua non to progress within our communities. We need to let our people understand the need to learn from the white people in the country. A white person is a white person, irrespective of where they come from in the world, and they band together. I have worked in different places in this country, where Black was a minority, and I have seen how white people will quickly band together around a cause, whether legit or illegit. So we need to begin to, I used to live, there was a time where I was living in Tennessee where Black people, you can count the number of Black people on your fingers in that particular city. When I was living there, interestingly, every Black person, and I believe Dr. Fabiyi, you met some of them when you came visiting, every Black person was a brother. Cameroonian, Sierra Leonean, Ghanaian, it doesn't matter. Even people from, Haiti, Jamaica, they were all brothers because we were, quote unquote, a threatened group in that area. And so we quickly saw ourselves as brothers and we band together. We do not have to wait till when our collective interests are threatened before we see the needs to get involved on a daily basis. Right. We need to let our people understand the need to adopt the other person's problem as our problem, because that is the only way we can survive as a Black people that is hated by all, like Mr. Sarumi said earlier, and it is very true. We are right now the drag of the world. The Black man is that person nobody wants to see in their environment. Is the person that everybody fights. It doesn't matter where you find yourself, in countries in Asia, in America, in North America, in South America, anywhere, a Black man is always that person that is hunted down. And the earlier we begin to come together, the better for us. And that is why this kind of talk is very important. We need to begin to reach out to the unreached. We need to begin to organize symposia. We need to be able to, we need to begin to set up talks, conferences, unfreeze that thing that is frozen in us, that make us not want to be engaged in political talks. And I think that is the first thing that we need to do before we can begin to move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Otunuga. Ms. Rachel, please, can you share with us some perspectives?
Good evening, all. Yes, I'm going to power through them because there's so many comments I don't quite know what to leave out. So you're going to get them all, starting from the beginning.
No, you cannot get them all.
Not all of them. All of the ones I had curated and compiled and kept aside. Right, so yeah, I'm not going to read the entire panel for you. So starting from Tinuade, she said, "We are not subdued. Nigerians are go-getters, aggressive enough to be on the right side of the law. Mr. Sarumi, with all due respect, you are totally wrong." So I thought I'd throw that straight up because, yeah, aggressive enough to be on the right side of the law? I don't know. Tolu says, I believe Nigerians come here with a superiority complex and a very materialistic / vain mindset. I wouldn't say all Nigerians, but certainly a lot of them. And he goes on to say, I reckon with Sir Sarumi's perspective, which exclusively describes the general attitude of the segment of Nigerians who migrated here, are not as engaged. Then you also have to take into serious account that Nigeria was ruled by several military regimes which have been known to squash dissent in whatever form or whichever wave Nigerians came here. So I think he's responding to, I think that was when we were talking about why is it that Nigerians don't engage here? I think he's responding to the fact that when you've been under military thumb, yeah, you learn to keep quiet and get on with it. Kenny Kalijaya says, we are naturally unpatriotic. Nigeria is made up of 3 disparate and utterly mismatched countries. Tolu says, my Nigerian relatives who come over are afraid to speak out against authority, and many do not see the benefits in going against the whites. So in response to most of the rebellions and protests starting in Lagos, Osarity said Ken Saro-Wiwa was an activist in Rivers State, and Tokwe responded, indeed, Saro-Wiwa was and eventually killed. Indeed, Ken Saro-Wiwa was, and was eventually killed by the military regime because he threatened the flow of petroleum from the oil-producing region he was fighting for, and gave that region to the foreign markets. I believe this is what this is. I'm going to leave the 2 questions that I'm going to leave right to the very end. Osarity says, I think the only unifying piece among Africans on both sides of the Atlantic will be through traditional beliefs, values, or customs. It wouldn't happen through politics, because politics will actually cause us to fight. All of the groups that we can name, and SCLC, SNCC, and AACP, the Black Panthers, etc., were built on principles and values, not just race. Do we have anything deeper to organize around, culture, etc.? And if so, who is building it? And then the final one is, there's no shortage of common benefits and singular purpose that Nigerians have been deprived of, even after successive democratically elected regime. We can build, I think he's trying to say, around increased employment, increased access to healthcare, particularly for children, improve our education, increase production in non-oil producing sectors of the economy, and so on. So I missed that. I thought he was actually talking about things we can do here in the US that we can rally around. So the question from Victor Olapojoye, sorry. Question for the panelists. We've shared ideas about next steps after the march, including encouraging and supporting Nigerians running for office. However, we have not touched on the financing aspect, which I believe is critical. Kindly let me know your thoughts about developing a credible Nigerian American political action committee. And so the second question was going to be the question from Osarity Obasaki, who says, do we have anything to get people to rally around? A unifying culture or vision or goals that we can set up, I don't know, possibly as some sort of charter? And if so, who would be behind it? So those are your 2 questions, panel.
Okay. So thank you very much. I think those are some really important questions. I think the first one, so let me just address the first one very quickly, and then I will throw the second panel. The first question was financing. Is there a Nigerian American PAC that we can rally around? I think.
I'm sorry, I wanted to unmute myself and I touched the yours by accident. Yes, the question was, he was about, could we create, where's the question again, please? 1 minute. Let me know your thoughts about developing a credible Nigerian American political action committee.
So I guess the first thing is to just basically indicate that over the last few weeks, I've actually learned about a number of groupings of Nigerians. I am not aware of, so here's my definition of effective. I think I'd shared this a while back, but I'll share it again. I shared it on one of the first panels we had. Last year, I have a political, a comrade of mine that I've worked with politically for many years, for about 30 years, for 3 decades in Nigeria. And we've done, along with Dr. Otunuga, that's actually where I first met Dr. Otunuga. We participated in students' movements, and we've done all of that together. He was arrested. He was arrested by the Nigerian government. He was put on trial for treason. But his family is Nigerian American. His family is American. So one of the things that we wanted to do, actually knowing that there was nothing that people could do back home that would shake the Nigerian government, one of the things we recognized we needed to do was actually to engage with the American political system. Because if there's one thing that our politicians fear, it is the fear of America still carries, America's voice is a very powerful voice. And I can tell you that I was completely taken aback by the fact that we could not find any credible way to engage with the American political system outside of structures that had nothing to do with Nigeria. So when we did get access to the senators and to the members of the House of Reps, when we did have those meetings, when we did request that they write those letters in support of this particular cause, it wasn't because there was a Nigerian American PAC or any Nigerian American movement or any Nigerian American grouping that had created political capital that we could build on. We had zero. So we had to start going with organizations that had nothing to do with our country, but who had independently built up their own political capital. So here's what I would say. I would say that I am encouraged by what I've seen over the last 2-3 months, that there are many Nigerian groupings that are beginning to emerge politically. There are many Nigerian groupings that are starting to speak up, but we are far from being effective. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about going forward, and which is why these conversations are important, is that we all need to begin to build towards uniting with different Nigerian groups and organizations that are out there working towards a common purpose. And I think that then brings me to the second question. So the answer to the first question is, I am not aware of any that exist to the extent that we need it to exist, because there's no influence. I've not seen any organization with influence. And influence in this country simply means we want to be able to engage with the structure and the levers of American government, with the White House, with the Senate, with the House of Reps, with the State Department. We do not have that level of impact and influence yet. And as long as we don't have that, then the reality is that we don't have an effective political level of engagement in the country presently. But what we need to be working towards, those of us here having this conversation, and the other groups that are out there that we can work with, is to move towards being able to get there. And as Mr. Olokwejoye has already alluded to, the currency of entry, the only way we can have that impact is not just by engaging, but also by being financially involved. So it has to, all of that has to go together. But then let's go to the other question, which is the question of, do we have anything that people can rally around? So if we're to become more effective, if we're to be able to mobilize each other, if we're to work together as a community, what are those things that we can all rally around? That it doesn't matter whether you are Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, it doesn't matter whether you're Ijaw, Efik, Ibibio, whether you are Fula, whether you are Kanuri, doesn't matter. As a Nigerian here, those are issues that, you know, there's no question that they affect all of us. and there are things that we can actually use to mobilize our community. So let me start that with Dr. Otunuga, and then we'll go to Mr. Sarumi, and then Ms. Okeke will round out those conversations.
So the question is, how do we go from here?
How do we go from here? But more importantly is, what are those things that we can rally around in going from here that will help us overcome those traditional divisions that automatically begin to come up? So one example I would think might be something like immigration. Whether you're Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, immigration issues are crucial issues, right? Maybe those types of matters, maybe education, maybe schooling, maybe access to resources, maybe green card issues.
Thank you. I think the first thing that we need to do is to define the modus operandi of our engagement vis-a-vis an organization. I think we need to register what we have started, give it a structure, and agree on the ideological thrust for that organization. That is the starting point, structure. Then I also, this is the 7th conference, right? In the past 7 weeks, well, in the last 6 weeks, different speakers have come up, and we have learned things that we never even thought about. In the areas of education, for instance, because we don't get involved, because we are not part of the PTA, because we don't go for any career, conference and all that, we are missing out. Some people who are experts have been panelists here. They have come to tell us some of those things. So I believe one of the ways that we can be relevant is to organize some kind of career talks, education conferences, for Nigerian Americans. We can be like, take up the role of a school advocacy group as part of our role. Parent-student awareness, what are the, scholarship opportunities that are out there. While the Dr. Ho was talking a few weeks ago, I think about 3 weeks ago when she was on, she made some points that actually, thrust some dirt into my heart. I have a daughter who is in college right now, who should get all these scholarships that are out there. She graduated with 4.2 something out of a possible 4.0. Yet I am still paying her tuition. There was something that I must have missed that was not done. And these are some of the ways that we can come in, educate parents. As we begin to grow our membership, as we begin to form synergies, as we begin to, form alliances, we are going to, get in touch or get people like Dr. O and other people who have extensive experience in all these areas of life. We're going to bring them together. We can form subcommittees of the group that will look into different aspects of our life. Another thing is the social engagement, the importance of networking, maybe around business opportunities. Churches do that. Why can't we? Promotion of socio-cultural values. We can actually have a working relationship with all the plethora of Nigerian organizations that Dr. Sarumi mentioned. There are a lot of Nigerian organizations out there who does nothing but just promote their own myopic, very minuscule agenda. We can hone in all of their efforts and all of their capital, to form a common front. Then again, you know, we can give platform to candidates. We can give our candidates a voice to reach out to our people. Now, it does not mean that we are going to automatically give endorsement to any candidate because they are Nigerian Americans, but we can give them a platform to reach out to their people, to talk about their agenda, their goals, the reasons why they are running. Those are some of the things that I think, you know, the areas that I think we can, it's very broad. These few things that I've mentioned, they are really, really, really broad. But I think we can start from there.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Sarumi, and then Ms. Okeke will close out the conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm. Personally, I'm not very versed in politics. You know, I said things the way I see them. But in moving forward, after these protests on August 28th, I think we'll have to kind of sit back with everybody and determine what next to do. But critical things that needs to happen, just like Dr. Otunuga said. One, we must find a way, right, to come together. There are all kinds of organizations all over the place, but it becomes tough, and that's the reality about it. It's so tough to get people together, particularly we Nigerians, because naturally we are divided tribally, and then we are divided religiously, and those are two potent issues that is so difficult to succumb to. Then it would be nice. It would be nice if we can come together as a people. And after August 28th, if this is to continue, I probably would suggest that even if we're going to come together, that whatever organization is going to come out of what we are doing now does not support anybody in Nigeria, because that tends to create a crack. And before you know it, there's going to be a fracture. But if anyone is interested, any Nigerian or African American brothers is interested in contesting for a political office in this country, then we should go ahead and support them. If a Nigerian, or it can even be a Ghanaian American, you know, as long as you're black and you're a brother to us, we can go ahead and, you know, and support you. But I would say for now, we should just stay out of Nigeria, because the Nigerian political environment is a hot boiling water, and I personally don't want to get involved in it. But when it comes to this country, I'll be ready, right, to be a part of a group that will liaise with others to see African Americans, Nigerian Americans, our kids get further ahead in whatever career they've chosen, whether it be politics or whatever they want to do in life, or fellow African American brothers. Because what affects me affects any African American in this country. Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you very
much. Thank you. So I think that some of the issues that we as Nigerians can rally around, where that we can find a solidarity under, could be the issue of immigration. A lot of us don't know, I think. I feel like we should know. A lot of us don't know, but, you know, we always, this country sort of thinks of immigration as some sort of a South American issue, you know, with the Latinos and whatnot. But after the Latinos, I don't even know if they're the most. Nigerians, Haitians, Jamaicans are the next people that are mostly deported from this country. And yet we have contributed some of the most, of course, after the Native Americans, to this country. So I think that's an issue that we can rally around. But, you know, that is to say that if the rest of Nigeria could care about other Nigerians enough to think that way. But I think that's an issue that we can rally around. We have to look past an individual issue, because what is to say that tomorrow they will not turn around and decide to go after people who have been naturalized? So, this is what rallying around an issue means. You want to stop it before it gets too big. You don't wait for it to get too bad and then you're like, oh my God, So I think immigration is one. Education is another. Also, immigration and education kind of tie in together, because we heard earlier this summer when ICE announced that if students will not go back on campus, international students will not go back on campus, then they might as well go back to their countries, and then they can do the school from their countries. First of all, international students are basically the ones that are funding the educational system in America. Okay, they pay a lot of money in fees to the educational system, and they were so willing to throw them out. And I feel like not a lot of people spoke up against that. We have a lot of Nigerians who are international students. That's another issue that we can rally around. Also, the fact that the cost for international students is so much, that makes it hard for other Nigerians who are not part of the 1% to be able to afford education outside of the country if they sought to do that. Another issue that we can rally around is police brutality, because that's another issue that we fall on there, and we don't tend to know it, but that also affects us as well, because I don't know if a lot of people don't have noticed, but African Americans and Nigerians look alike. We tend to look so much alike in the face. If we don't open our mouths, sometimes you won't know who's who. So that's another issue that we can rally around. And so where do we go from here? I think with this thing, with this walk, this rally, this walk that we are gonna partake in, I think it's important to continue to have these conversations and to, get involved or kind of connect ourselves with other people who have been getting this work done in a long time. So other groups, especially other African American groups who are not new to this. I think it would be important to, sort of join forces with them, and see where we can take this, and then continuing to use our voice and everything that we have to support ourselves, so like, with those issues that I mentioned, taking it seriously, fighting for it, speaking up. And then we should more seriously think about producing political representation. When we see Nigerians running on platforms that sound and seem like it will be beneficial to us and the other Black people in this country, I think it's important that we support them and we, blast their messages and let it be known, just like we saw the Somalis do for Ilhan Omar. So I think this is where we should take these next steps. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I really want to thank all of you for your really, really deep and incisive perspectives. And I will throw something else out there. I think the three of you have comprehensively provided us with a map, a blueprint for what those levels and areas of engagement potentially can be. I would add to the notion of, so political engagement is important, especially by Nigerian Americans, other Africans. But I will also want to suggest that, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is a personal viewpoint, friends of Nigeria who are white, because here's the reality. The reality is that ultimately, the Senate with its 100 members, the House with its 400 and something members, those houses, both of them are going to be predominantly white. And so if we are to get anything done, we are still going to need allies. And I give you the example again of what we experienced when we were trying to get elements of the US government to get involved in trying to bring the government in Nigeria to order, right? In trying to make sure that there was fairness in a particular case that was going on. We didn't get a letter. We visited one of the few African members of the US Congress, and what we were told was that the issue was too political. Guess who gave us letters? The people who gave us letters were white congressmen and women. And of course, a lot of African American congresspersons as well. So people like Karen Bass, people like Sheila Lee, Sheila Jackson, they were very, very helpful. So one of the things, and they're not Nigerian, they're not African in any way, right? Some of them are not even Black, but they had enough of an interest in what was going on in our country that they put their political capital against something that we were doing. So what I'll encourage us to do is to also look beyond whether the person is Nigerian or whether the person is Black or African. That the African American congressperson who believes in Nigeria, is interested in Nigeria, wants to see Nigeria move forward, wants to see Nigerian Americans move forward, we should be supporting that person. The white congressperson who basically says, yes, I believe that you guys are making fruitful contributions to this country, and I am a friend of Nigeria, and therefore, if the issue that the Nigerian American community believes in, I'm ready to put my capital behind, we should be supporting that person. So those would be what I would throw out as well, that the definition of who we support and how and why we support them, we should expand that beyond the fact that they're just Nigerian or the fact that they're just Africans. I think we have to end the conversation here. It is 7:45. And
you've got Dr. Otunuga with his hand up.
Okay, Dr. Otunuga?
Yes, there is, I realize there is a particular aspect of our discussion that we didn't touch on, and that is, do we think protests work?
Maybe not today.
Okay.
That is that is another conversation by itself. So
what's that? What was that?
The protest work.
Okay.
Yes. So let's leave that off the table. But it's an important point because, of course, unless we believe it works, then none of what we're doing, it means that we may not be coming at this fully convinced that the efforts that we're going to make will make any difference. But we'll leave that to the next panel where we'll tackle it. What I want to do now is, really profusely thank the panel for what they've done for today's conversation. And then to remind everybody that, look, we're here, we want to march. Please make sure that you are registered to march. If you want to participate in the panel conversations, please send us an email. We welcome a variety of voices. Please make sure your voice is heard. There's some incredible contributions that people are providing in the chats. We want some of those conversations to actually come on the stage. So please, if you want to be part of the panel, send us an email, give us a phone call. Let any of us, let any of the coordinators know, and we'll be very happy to help you. And then we're on Facebook. So please join us on Facebook. And I want to wish everybody a great week going forward and look forward to talking to everybody again when we meet next week. Have a blessed week, everybody. Take care.
Bye.